So imagine looking out over the modern cityscape of Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Right, just your standard modern city view.
Exactly. You've got the sprawling subdivisions, the paved highways, the grid of strip malls just kind of baking in the high desert sun.
Yeah.
But I want you to peel back that pavement, like strip away the highways, take out the housing developments, and dial the clock back nearly 500 years.
All the way back to the winter of 1540.
Right. And what you'd see is not some empty, quiet desert wilderness.
Not at all.
You are standing in the middle of a thriving, interconnected civilization. We're talking massive, multi-story buildings. And marching right toward them is this heavily armed expeditionary force on a direct collision course.
A collision that would literally ignite America's first named war.
Welcome to our deep dive. I'm so glad you could join us today. Our mission here is to unpack a really fascinating stack of sources. We're looking at National Park Service records, historical overviews, and some incredibly cutting-edge archaeological reports.
Yeah, the archaeology on this is just mind-blowing.
It really is. And we're using all of this to understand the Tiguex War. That's spelled T-I-G-U-E-X, but pronounced T-wish.
Right, the Tiguex War. And the stakes here are just profound. I mean, this isn't just a story of exploration or a minor border skirmish.
No, it's way bigger than that.
It's a full-scale, catastrophic clash of cultures. You've got an expedition funded basically like 16th century venture capital, and it's crashing into a highly sophisticated indigenous resistance network.
Which completely, permanently forged the American Southwest as we know it today.
Exactly. It's a complex narrative with tens of thousands of people involved.
So before we can really understand the war itself, we have to understand the board, right? Like who was living on this land and who exactly was marching toward them.
We have to set the stage. So let's talk about the Tiguex province, which was home to the Tiwa people.
Okay.
They had been living along the middle Rio Grande Valley for thousands of years. It was a total powerhouse of a civilization.
And we're not talking about a small handful of people here, right?
No, conservative estimates put the population at like 10 to 20,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were spread across 12 or 13 massive adobe and stone pueblos.
I think when a lot of people hear the word pueblo, they picture, a tiny cluster of little clay huts.
Right, which is just completely wrong. The archaeological records show something totally different. Some of these structures had up to 450 rooms just on the ground floor.
Wait, 450 rooms just on the ground level?
Just the ground floor.
Yeah.
Building something like that requires massive, coordinated civic labor.
I can imagine.
And specialized engineering knowledge, too. They used thick earth walls to absorb the intense desert heat during the day, then it releases that heat during those freezing nights. Thermal mass.
Exactly, thermal mass. These were multi-story fortresses functioning as self-sustaining urban centers.
That's incredible. And there were farmers, too, right?
Master agriculturalists. They grew multiple varieties of corn, squash, beans, but their real economic leverage, the thing that gave them regional power, was cotton.
Oh, interesting. Cotton. Yeah, they wove this exceptionally fine cotton cloth. In a region where the winters are brutal, having high-quality warm cloth is almost like having hard currency.
So if you control the cotton supply, you hold massive diplomatic power.
You hold all the cards. So you have this deeply entrenched, wealthy civilization.
And marching toward them is something entirely different. Let's pivot to the Spanish colonial machine. It's the 1500s. We are in a post-Aztec, post-Inca world.
The Spanish psychology at this point is completely warped.
Warped by what Cortez and the Pizarros pulled off, right?
Exactly. They extracted so much immense wealth that the Spanish crown and the elites in New Spain basically expected that there was always another empire of gold just over the next horizon.
Just waiting to be plundered. So what was the specific spark that sent them up toward the Tiguex province?
Well, it's actually born out of a spectacular failure, the Narvaez expedition of 1527.
Right, the one that completely disintegrated along the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, it was a disaster. After years of wandering, just a tiny handful of survivors managed to walk all the way across the continent to Mexico City.
That journey alone is wild.
It's insane. But among those survivors was an enslaved African man named Estevanico. And the intelligence they brought back, rumors of these massive wealthy settlements to the north, it just ignited an absolute frenzy.
So they force Estevanico to turn right around.
Yeah, they make him guide a scouting party in 1539, led by a priest, Fray Marcos de Niza.
And that doesn't go well for Estevanico.
No, he pushes ahead, reaches a Zuni settlement, and is killed in the encounter.
And the priest.
Fray Marcos hears about it and just turns tail and flees back to Mexico City.
But the reality of that failed scouting mission didn't really matter, did it?
Not at all. Because he brought back a narrative. He claimed he saw the legendary 7 cities of Cíbola, these mythical cities of gold, just shimmering in the distance.
Yeah, the pitch deck.
Exactly. That unverified rumor was the pitch deck that launched a massive new venture.
It really is just like an aggressively funded modern startup looking for an immediate return on investment. They weren't exploring just for the sake of science. They were looking for a huge payout.
A literal payout. The financial structuring here is the engine for all the violence that comes next. The expedition was backed by the Viceroy, Antonio de Mendoza, and heavy hitters like Pedro de Alvarado.
How much money are we talking about here?
Roughly 600,000 Spanish pesos.
Which translates to what in modern terms?
Well, by weight, it's about 19 tons of silver. Today, that's roughly a $20 million enterprise.
$20 million? Wow.
But the crazy part is how the debt was structured. It wasn't just the Viceroy risking money. The foot soldiers themselves were taking out huge personal loans.
Wait, really? The grunts were paying to be there?
Oh, yeah. A common foot soldier might go into, like, $30,000 of modern debt just to buy a spot in the ranks.
That is wild. So they are essentially buying equity in a violent startup.
That's exactly what it was. And if they don't find liquid wealth like gold, silver, or captives to enslave, they are financially ruined for life.
So they're desperate. They have to extract wealth or they're destroyed.
Right. And leading this whole desperate enterprise is Francisco Vázquez de Coronado.
A young, politically connected guy who, if I remember the sources correctly, had literally zero military experience.
None whatsoever. But he had the financial backing. Now, we really need to talk about the makeup of this army he's leading, because it totally defies the pop culture image we have.
Oh, for sure. Because when we picture the Spanish invasion, we picture, a few hundred European guys in shiny iron armor hacking their way through the desert.
Which is completely historically inaccurate. Out of a fighting force of roughly 2,000 soldiers, only about 350 were actually Europeans.
That is such a shocking demographic detail. So who are the rest of them?
The vast majority, like between 1,300 and 2,000 fighters, were indigenous allies from central and western Mexico.
The Spanish called them the Indios Amigos, right? Or aliados.
Yeah. We're talking about Tarascan, Tenochca, Tlatelolca, and Mexico warriors.
So wait, let me get this straight. When we picture this Spanish invasion, we're actually picturing an army where 3/4 of the soldiers were native Mesoamericans.
Yes.
How does that change the dynamic of first contact with the pueblos?
It shifts everything. The Tiguex weren't just seeing a small band of weird Europeans. They were encountering a massive Mesoamerican army managed by a Spanish elite class. And these Mesoamerican troops didn't fight like the Spanish.
They brought their own weapons, right? The armas de tierra.
Exactly. They fought in thick cotton armor, which was super effective against arrows. And they brought slings, lances, and the absolute most devastating weapon, the macana.
The obsidian-edged sword.
The mecowiddle. Yeah. It's a wooden broadsword embedded with prismatic obsidian blades. Obsidian can be knapped to be sharper than modern surgical steel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from the Aztec conquest records, we know a full swing from a macana could literally decapitate a horse.
That is terrifying.
It's catastrophic kinetic energy in close quarters combat. And on top of this massive fighting force, you have this insane logistical nightmare.
Right, because you have to feed all these people.
You have 350 servants and camp followers, over 1,000 horses and mules, and because you can't forage in the high desert for thousands of people.
They brought their own food on the hoof?
Thousands of head of livestock, cattle, goats, sheep, plus war dogs.
So it's basically a massive, hungry, heavily armed moving city making its way north.
And creating an immense ecological pressure wherever it stops. Which leads us to the first contact.
Right. So before they even get to the Rio Grande, they hit that Zuni settlement, Hawiku, in July of 1540.
And it immediately goes bad. The Zuni clearly have a protocol for unwanted incursions. They draw a line of cornmeal in the dirt.
Such a clear symbolic boundary, like literally drawing a line in the sand. Do not cross.
Exactly. And how do the Spanish respond? They read the requerimiento.
Oh, this is the legal document, right?
Yeah, it's this absurd document demanding immediate submission to the Spanish crown and the Pope. And they read it in Spanish.
Which the Zunis obviously do not speak.
Right. It was just a legal loophole so the Spanish could feel absolved of the violence they were about to commit.
And when the Zunis hold their ground, violence erupts.
The Zuni fight incredibly well from the rooftops, raining down stones. Coronado actually gets knocked off his feet by rocks.
He's nearly killed, isn't he?
He only survives because his European helmet takes the hits, and his officers jump in to save him. The Spanish eventually take the settlement, but it proves that attacking Pueblo architecture is deadly.
So they realize the pueblos are formidable fortresses. But then, in September 1540, they push east to the Rio Grande and meet the Tiwa people in the Tiguex province.
And here, the initial encounter looks totally different. Hernando de Alvarado takes an advanced scouting party, and the Tiwa leaders don't draw a line in the dirt.
They try diplomacy.
Yes, they come out, cross their hands, which is this recognized sign of inviolable peace, and they offer amazing gifts.
Cotton mantas, hides, turquoise, turkeys.
Right. They were treating the Spanish like dignitaries or trade partners.
Which is how a mutual respect system works. You accept the gifts, you follow the rules.
But that social contract fractures the moment the full weight of Coronado's army actually arrives, because they show up right as an exceptionally brutal winter sets in.
And the Spanish are completely unprepared for the cold.
Freezing and starving. So Coronado makes a decision that shatters the peace. He commandeers a massive Tiguex Pueblo called Alcanfor.
He doesn't just ask to share it, though.
No, he forces the entire population out into the freezing winter, just evicts them with nothing but the clothes on their backs.
That's horrifying. They have to go crowd into neighboring pueblos, and the Spanish demands just keep escalating.
Because of those thousands of livestock, they turn the animals loose in the Tiguex agricultural fields.
And the animals eat the dry corn stalks.
Which the Tiwas desperately need for winter fuel to heat their homes.
So they take their homes, they eat their heating fuel, and then the Spanish start forcibly stripping the cotton cloaks right off the backs of the Tiguex people just to stay warm.
They're acting like an occupying army, not diplomatic guests. But the actual spark of the war, the breaking point, is a profound violation of justice.
Right, the assault. Tell us about what happened with Juan de Villegas.
A Tiguex man from the pueblo of Arenal comes to the Spanish leadership. He reports that Juan de Villegas, a Spanish officer, assaulted his wife.
And he demands justice.
Because he assumes there's a legal framework here. But the Spanish dismiss it. They claim there's a lack of evidence.
It's a classic, tragic failure of a mutual respect system. I mean, the Spanish expected submission and free lodging, but to the Tiguex, the moment justice for an assault is denied, the social contract is completely severed. You just can't take a civilization's homes, eat their winter fuel, and assault their people without an explosion.
You can't. And that explosion happens immediately. The Tiguex retaliate by going after the Spanish logistics. They kill between 40 and 60 Spanish horses and mules, and the Mesoamerican guards watching them.
Which is brilliant tactically. Taking out the horses cripples the Spanish mobility.
Coronado sees the threat and officially declares war. And the Spanish military doctrine here is brutal. React to any provocation with immediate, overwhelming terror.
So they target Arenal, the pueblo where the retaliation started.
Captain Garcia Lopez de Cardenas leads the attack. The Tiguex defenders quickly realize they're facing this overwhelming combined arms assault, and they try to surrender.
And the way they try to surrender is so heartbreaking.
It is. They had seen the Spanish revering the cross, so they make the sign of the cross, thinking it means peace.
They use the very symbol the Spanish taught them.
Exactly. The Spanish accept the surrender, round up about 100 Tiguex men, and put them in a tent.
But they don't treat them as prisoners of war.
No. Cardenas claims he didn't know the terms of the surrender. The Spanish start tying these men to wooden stakes. They're preparing to burn them alive.
Just a calculated act of terror.
When the Tiguex men realize what's happening, that the symbol of peace was a trap, they fight back with unbelievable desperation.
They grab the burning stakes meant for their own execution.
They try to fight their way out, but they are cornered and slaughtered by the cavalry and the Mesoamerican infantry.
But this massacre at Arenal totally backfires on the Spanish, doesn't it?
Completely. Because it proves to the rest of the pueblos that Spanish diplomacy is a lethal trap. Surrender means death.
And so they change their entire strategy. The surviving Tiguex abandon those vulnerable riverside villages.
And they consolidated this mesa-top stronghold called Mojol.
Led by a chief named Aizayan, right? I think the Spanish called him Juan Aleman.
Right. And Coronado, thinking he can just roll over them after Arenal, tries a direct frontal assault on Mojol.
But the Tiguex have the high ground this time.
They use their architecture perfectly. As the Spanish try to scale the walls, the Tiguex just rain down massive stones and arrows from the multi-story rooftops.
And the adobe itself is basically bulletproof against the 16th century guns.
Yeah, the lead balls from the early arquebuses just hit that dense earth and get swallowed up. It absorbs the kinetic energy. The Spanish can't breach the walls, and Coronado is violently repulsed. He takes dozens of casualties.
Wait, so knowing the Spanish had overwhelming technological superiority, horses, muskets, metal armor, Why did it take them so long to break a single pueblo?
Because after that failed assault, they're forced into a static siege. And they're stuck outside in the freezing winter, while the Tiguex are inside, protected by the thermal mass of the adobe.
Ah, so it becomes a waiting game. How long does the siege of Moho last?
Somewhere between 50 to 80 days.
Wow. 2 to 3 months.
But the critical issue for the Tiguex is water. Moho is on a mesa well above the water table.
So they're dying of thirst.
Driven by absolute desperation, they actually tried to dig a massive well right inside the pueblo during the bombardment.
Did they find water?
They hit dry dirt, so they're forced to make a breakout attempt under the cover of night.
And they organize it so carefully, putting the women and children in the center of the formation.
Flanked by the warriors. They try to slip through the Spanish lines, but the sentries spot them.
And it turns into this brutal fight in the dark.
A horrific close-quarters battle. Joaquin is killed, physically shielding the women and children.
Oh, man.
The survivors are pushed back toward the freezing Rio Grande. The water is running high with icy melt. Many of them drown just trying to cross, and those who are captured get enslaved.
The fall of Moho effectively breaks the centralized defense, but the resistance doesn't end there, does it?
Not at all. It just shifts to these highly sophisticated strategies of asymmetric warfare.
This is the part that completely blew my mind. The information networks. They didn't just use bows and arrows, they used incredible communication systems.
The coordination is staggering. They use smoke signals, but not just random puffs, precise optical telegraphs across the valley to track the Spanish army in real time.
And they used relay runners. There's that one detail in the sources about a delegation from Pecos Pueblo.
Oh, right. They ran 190 miles on foot to Zuni territory just to share intelligence about the Spanish army.
190 miles just to warn the next town. That shows a level of inter-Pueblo alliance the Spanish couldn't even comprehend.
And they used incredible deception tactics, too. Even before Moho fell, Zoyan tricked Captain Cardenas into an unarmed parley.
Oh, this is the hug, right?
Yeah, Zoyan embraces Cardenas, and while he's distracted, 2 hidden warriors strike the captain in the head with maces.
It's just relentless resistance. But the ultimate deception, the masterstroke, comes from an indigenous captive of the Spanish called El Turco.
El Turco is a tactical genius. He observes the Spanish, sees how obsessed they are with metal and gold, and he realizes that their greed is their core weakness.
So he builds a trap perfectly designed for venture capitalists.
He invents this mythical kingdom to the east called Quivira.
And he goes all out with the details. Giant fish, massive canoes with sails.
And the hook? Boards eating their meals off solid golden dishes.
It's like an elaborate distraction burglary, but on a geopolitical scale. He didn't just lie. He weaponized their own greed to literally march them out of town and onto the Great Plains.
And it works perfectly. Coronado buys it, packs up his entire army, and abandons the Rio Grande to march hundreds of miles into modern-day Kansas.
Just chasing a mirage. These stories are so incredible, but for centuries, they mostly just lived in biased Spanish documents.
Until recently.
Right, because modern archaeologists started pulling the actual physical evidence out of the New Mexico dirt. Let's talk about Piedras Marcadas.
Piedras Marcadas Pueblo, the village of the marked rocks. It's located entirely within present-day Albuquerque.
And it's excavated by Matthew F. Schmader, right?
Roger Schmader, yes. It is the largest, most intact battle site of the Tiguex War ever found. They estimated around 1,000 ground floor adobe rooms around a central plaza.
But they didn't just start digging randomly. They used electrical resistivity testing.
Right. They map the minute variations in electrical resistance in the soil to essentially X-ray the subterranean adobe walls.
And once they knew where the walls were, they brought in the metal detectors. What did they find?
Over 1,000 16th century metal artifacts sitting just 3 to 8 centimeters below the surface.
Wait, 3 to 8 centimeters? That's barely 2 or 3 inches deep.
Just inches below the modern world.
And the artifacts are incredibly specific. They found facet-headed wrought iron nails.
Which were used for European horseshoes.
Right. They found copper lace tags, called aglets, for clothing, buckles, chainmail links, flattened lead musket balls.
And the most important temporal anchor, copper crossbow arrow points called bolt heads.
Because crossbows were phased out shortly after the 1540s.
Exactly. Finding those bolt heads is basically a forensic timestamp for the Coronado expedition.
So the dirt is literally showing us the exact spots where the fighting was heaviest, where the horses charged, where the crossbows were fired. It's like a forensic crime scene from 1540.
But the most fascinating proof they found wasn't European at all. It was the physical proof of the Indios Amigos.
The Mesoamerican allies. How do you prove they were there archaeologically?
With stone, they found non-local bird points, which are these distinct arrowheads that don't match Pueblo designs.
Okay.
And they found formal sling stones that were deliberately ground along the midline to fly straighter, unlike the local river rocks.
But the real smoking gun is the obsidian, isn't it?
Thousands of tiny obsidian microflakes inside the plaza.
The matanas.
Exactly. When those obsidian-edged swords struck adobe walls or bone in close combat, the brittle obsidian shattered. The breakage patterns perfectly match the impact forensics of a Macana.
It's just unbelievable to have physical proof of Mesoamerican warriors clashing with Southwest Pueblans right there. The physical scars on the land perfectly mirror the historical scars left on the people.
Which brings us to the long-term aftermath.
Because Coronado eventually realizes he's been played, right?
Yeah. He chases El Turco's lie to Kansas, finds 0 gold, executes El Turco in a rage, and eventually returns to Mexico in 1542, an absolute failure.
He dies a dozen years later, totally in debt.
But the Tiguex people had to live with the devastation. They reoccupied their lands, but the population was decimated.
Many of those massive pueblos were just abandoned or consolidated.
The society survived, but the Tiguex War fundamentally altered the region. It was the bloody birth of a new world in the Southwest.
A complex fusion of languages, foods, architecture, but also a deep generational trauma.
Coronado's broken promises, the violence, the burning at Arenal, that distrust lingered for over a century.
And it directly laid the groundwork for the massive Pueblo Revolt of 1680.
Where they successfully drove the Spanish out of New Mexico for 12 years.
Which is why this history matters today. When you walk through the modern American Southwest, you are walking on a landscape of profound resistance and survival.
The Tiguex people didn't disappear. They're still there today, in vibrant communities, holding on to their past and their future.
Think about Piedras Marcadas, sitting just beneath the surface of modern Albuquerque. People drive past it every day. It makes you wonder, how many other forgotten battlefields, how many epic stories of resistance are hiding just 3 inches under the soil of our own backyards, just waiting for someone with a metal detector and a willingness to listen to the past?
There's so much history right under our feet.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.